This is Alan Stewart with B&B Yacht Designs, and trying something a little different here. We have builder question on the Messing About forum, and I thought I would just do a video reply rather than write a book on the forum. And this is dealing with some damage that this boat sustained when another boat backed into it while this Spindrift 11 nesting was on a set of davits, and it did a fair amount of damage to the side that pressed up against the mothership while it's hanging in the davits. So excuse me, the builder here, AFERS, on the forum has posted the damage and is soliciting advice, which we're happy to provide. So you can see some of the other people have chimed in here. Graham chimed in, and I think Graham's recommendation, of course, is 100% correct, and I totally agree. I thought I would just give a little extra, explaining of what I would do with what I see here. And granted, the builder is at a marina, potentially does not have access to a lot of tools, but you are going to need some tools to fix this. And I'll switch over to this Rhino view where I've pulled in the pictures of the damage. So here is the Spindrift 11 nesting, and the gunnel guard has been removed, and there are a few main areas of damage. So obviously it hit, at least to what I can see, it hit in the back and it hit in the front. So they must have been pressing up against the davit poles, I assume. And there's a crack in the side of the hull here, vertical crack that's pretty clean, and some damage to the gunnel. There's also some separation here of the rub rail at the nesting bulkhead, and there's a pretty nasty crack here at the stern seating, and some damage to the rub rail, I believe, and some separation of the rub rail at the quarter knee. So I'll just zoom in here. There's a picture of the rub rail aft where it's separating from the side of the hull, and there's a picture from the back. Looking at this picture, it doesn't look like this crack gets into the plywood. It's hard to tell, but that's just what it looks like. Also, it doesn't look like there's any fasteners through the rub rail into the quarter knee, and that may, having some fasteners, which are shown in the plans here, may have prevented this from splitting, although it could have also just caused it to crack further ahead. So but we do show some fasteners here, and maybe they are there and they pulled out. I can't tell from the picture. And then on the inside, there's a pretty bad crack. This is the outside of the hull, and this L shape is the shape of the aft seat, and it's basically just punched the side of the hull in beyond the seat box. So there's some. So this is actually a pretty easy repair to what I can see, because we can be pretty sure that the part of the hull that's inside the seat box is fine, because the seat box prevented, this structure here prevented the side of the hull from being damaged, but it cracked along this line here. So the way I would, and then the last area here is the nesting bulkhead. There's some cracks here where the rub rail is cracked and separated from the side of the hull, and there's a picture of that from the top. So there's a clear crack there. This one does look like it gets into the plywood, and a hairline crack there. And at the front, we have cracking to the rub rail or the gunnel, and a vertical split right down the side of the side panel. Pretty clean break, which is good, in the sense that it should be easy to repair. So Graham recommended, I'll just start at the bow here. Graham recommended a butt block on the inside, 4 inches wide, out of 6mm plywood, that would basically just cover this crack So you would grind the paint off down to epoxy, of course, glue on your butt block, and either clamp it or screw it to pull the hull back into fair, and then recoat it, and that would be totally sufficient to re-strengthen the side panel there. As far as the gunnel goes, one method would just be to drill some little 1/8-inch holes into some of these cracks and just try to inject it with as much epoxy as you could with a syringe. If it's really cracked, I think the builder mentioned that one of the laminations or part of the rub rail was still intact, and so injecting it might be the best option. To replace the rub rail section, that's also a possibility. You would just cut a tapered scarf on either away from the crack, cut a new piece, and glue it in there. That's a little bit more involved, and you have to be careful to keep it fair. And this is a laminated gunnel, so you'd have to decide if you wanted to repair it with laminations or just a straight piece. But I think from what I can see here, I would probably just try to inject this into the cracks and then grind it down from the outside and recoat it. You could even put a piece of glass over the outside if you wanted to, like a 8-ounce glass. And the other way to repair this vertical crack would be with a butt tape joint, so basically grind the paint off on the inside and the outside, and force the two sections back into alignment, and put a piece of fiberglass tape on the outside of the boat, vertically on the outside, and put a piece of plastic over it, and then put a piece of scrap plywood on top of that, and then screw that plywood down to the side of the hull, and that will force the hull back into fair as much as you can. And then with it in that position, you could put the piece of glass tape on the inside, and that would be just as good as a butt block. A little more tricky to do, maybe, and then you would leave that outer plywood pad in place until it had fully cured. I'd probably give it a few days for the epoxy to get nice and hard, and that should get it really close. And then if you wanted to refair it, you could refair the outside. I'll move to the back now. So there's a few different damages here. There's also a little crack in the top side there, just above the stern seat, and then you can see this hairline crack here, all the way near the front part of the stern seat. So the gunnel is clearly separated from the side of the hull. So what that probably means is you're going to need to run a handsaw through this crack probably all the way to about the front of the seat. So basically separating the gunnel from the side of the hull all the way up to here, and then re-gluing it essentially. The crack is either in the wood or in the glue, probably in the wood, and it probably bounces into the plywood. So, cutting this, you'll probably end up with some plywood on either side and some solid wood on either side, and you'll probably be sort of slicing through the glue and some wood. And but separating that will eliminate the crack, and then re-gluing it, and then refastening it, and then sanding it and recoating the outside. That would take care of the gunnel. For the seat, for the side repair, similar to the bow crack, I would just clean up these fractured pieces here, pull those out, and if it won't pop back out into place, I would use a rod, a stick on the inside to force the side of the hull back out until this crack was flush again. And at the same time I did that, I would squirt a bunch of thickened epoxy into this crack and just get it as far down into the ends of the crack as I could. I wouldn't worry about getting it 100%, just as far as you can, and then force this out so it's back into fair. And you would grind or sand the paint down off the outside, and then just put a piece of fiberglass tape or a cloth on the outside, just a single layer of like the 10-ounce tape, the same stuff that you use to build the hull, to fiberglass the hull, would be perfectly good. And then once that was kicked off, you could take this inside support, or maybe you could locate the inside support such that it's not in the way. But essentially, you're just going to do the same thing on the inside, sand or grind down away the paint in the area where the stern seat is, joining to the hull. So from probably about here all the way to about there, and then you just put a new piece of fiberglass tape. I think the plywood looks pretty intact, so that's all I would do. And where this little crack is here, I would just extend the tape up to that point. So another little piece of tape here, inside and outside, and that would take care of that crack. And when you have the gunnel pulled away, I would squirt some glue into that crack and then let it close back up again. And with the glass inside and out, you've got a glass reinforced butt joint, and that's as good as the surrounding plywood. The last thing that's obvious is the cracked gunnel where it attaches at the nesting bulkhead. And Graham had this happen on one of his nesting dinghies, and I'll pull up a picture of that. Let's see, I've got it right here. So this is a picture of Graham's 2-paw, and this shows it before it separated, but his was due to some damage from transporting it, and a similar little hairline crack formed here, and he sawed it out and re-glued it with a sliver of wood like he described. But I wanted to show this picture because it shows the glass on the outside, and how close it gets up to the laminated rub rail. So this piece of glass here is helping to hold everything together up at this corner. The obvious thing to reinforce this corner would be to put in another like a quarter knee. Unfortunately, you can't put a quarter knee in the stern half because then the bow half won't nest. It'll be in the way. And some nesting dinghy designs do put a knee, but they sacrifice some of the nested size. It's a little, they give up. They make the nested size of the boat larger so that the bow half doesn't come all the way to the nesting bulkhead interface of the stern half, and that gives them room to put a knee. And you'll see that in some other nesting designs. And ours, the nesting bulkheads stay back to back, so there's no room for a knee in the stern half. You could put a knee in the forward half if you wanted to. You could put a little triangle here on the forward half as a little gusset to back that up. But what I would do in this case is similar to the back. I would use a handsaw to cut through these cracks, and basically what Graham said, run some new glue in there and a sliver of wood if you need to, probably because of the kerf of the saw will be at least a fat 16th. And so you'll need a sliver of wood to slide in there to take up the saw curve. And then it'll be re-glued and as strong as it was. What you could do at that point then would be you could grind a little bit away in this area, the end grain of the rub rail at the nesting bulkhead, the gunnel, and a little bit off this doubler area. And you could put a couple pieces of glass around this just to help tie all that in, but really just re-gluing it is sufficient. But what you've got to do is saw through that crack, and you can see where the crack kind of dips down into the top side. So you just got to follow it as best you can, and then squirt some thickened epoxy in it, and that's what you do. So that's pretty much all the obvious damage that we could see from the forum pictures. It's certainly nowhere near the level of giving up on the boat. I mean, this is minor repair work, really. So understandably, you need some tools and time and a dry place to work. But this is a 2 to 3 day job to where it's ready to put some paint back on it. So so I hope that helps you with the repair efforts, and I'm going to post this to the forum, and hopefully this is more information than just me typing it out, and I'll see how that goes. And any follow-ups, we'll maybe make another video when we if you have any questions, or but yeah, post your progress, and we'll keep following. So that's it. Thanks.